Good evening, and welcome to the February 26th work session of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining. Please join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I have just one announcement. I received an email today which I wanted to read. Dear Bill, I wanted to let you and the village administration know about 3 men who make your village services group look really good. Now this, after this terrible series of storms we've had and garbage and collection and whatever, these 3 guys are named David, Chuck, and Chris, and they are the sanitation workers who handle the route that runs by my house on Rockledge Avenue. Not only are they friendly, they smile and wave back when I wave hello, but they are fast and efficient. It's like watching a synchronized team. They work so smoothly together. I was particularly impressed today. I looked out the window when I heard the truck coming because I had missed the last recyclables pickup and wanted to see if my stuff got collected. Not only did it get collected, but when one of the gentlemen brought the trash bins back to the curb from the truck, he noticed that there was a plastic container that dropped. I waited to see if he would put it back in my garbage bin, but he didn't. He picked it up. He picked up that one little container and took it to the truck. It would have been so easy just to toss it back in the bin and forget about it, but obviously the men take great pride in their work. It shows. Kind regards, Wendy Mantell. I really appreciate hearing good things about the people who work so hard for this village, and I thought I would share that with you tonight. Anyone else? Sure.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to just sort of echo the mayor's sentiments about the extraordinary efforts of our municipal employees over the last month. You know, these guys have been working around the clock. You know, they have to give them time off just to sleep, and it's really been tough on every municipality. But I think we really did the best we can. We tried to field. I mean, I know that our administration has fielded calls about complaints and trying to get everything in, you know, to where it needs to be. Hopefully, we're going to get a break from any large storms in the near term. But I just want to compliment, you know, all our village employees for their hard work and their dedication to their jobs. Thank you.
Here.
Next storm Sunday night to Monday, we're told.
We'll see.
Anyone else? Onward?
Well, I will remind people to visit energizeossining.org. And if your home is feeling at all breezy on these cold nights, it could be a lot more comfortable, and it might not even cost you any out-of-pocket money. So go ahead and visit energizeossining.org and learn how you can take advantage of this program while it is still available to residents in our area.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you. We have a lengthy agenda of several items of great interest, and it'll be followed by a executive session for the purposes of discussing legal advice, obtaining legal advice, and also for discussing collective negotiations. So the first item on the agenda this evening is an update on Harbor Square, which is the residential and restaurant complex that is about to break ground down on the waterfront. This evening we have Joe Digaleski from the Ginsberg Development Companies, and I know that he and the Ginsberg Company and our counsel, Laura Lee Dixon, have been working very hard to finalize the land acquisition development agreement, and so we feel that we are at a point, hopefully, where it is shared to the satisfaction of the board. So I'll turn it over to Joe.
Good evening, Mayor
Evening, Joe.
and trustees.
And Mark.
And so, Joe Zagaleski, Ginsberg Development. I brought with me Mark Ginsberg this evening, who's been integral in working with Village Corporation Council and Village technical staff, as well as our lenders for the project, in getting this revision to the land acquisition and development agreement to a final state. I think we've made a lot of progress. A lot of hard work has gone in on both our part and the village's part over the past several months. and I believe the copy's been circulated. And I think we're here tonight to field any questions or comments that the board may have.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank you both, but personally, Lori, thank you very much for all of the work that has gone into this, all three of you, Andy as well. On the GDC side of this, it's an extraordinary document. I read the original document so long ago, and all of those changes to it, and this is wonderful. I do have some questions and issues. I just got it today and read it today, but if you'll turn to page 13, where there is mention in the downtown development paragraph, the last sentence of it, starting the downtown development fund payment and any supplement, blah, 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 it talks about 5 members. 4 of the Development Fund Council should be nominated by the village, 1 by the developer. My recollection was that we were expanding that to 7.
No, it's 3 and it's going to 5.
It's 3 going to 5.
Yeah, the expansion is from 3
Okay, so
to 5.
my recollection is wrong.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry about that.
Can I ask a question about that exact language that Bill Hanauer was referring to? Is that all right, just since you're there? When it says the 4 members of the downtown, and this is probably more for the people at this table than for the developers, but the 4 members of the Downtown Development Fund Council that shall be nominated by the village, typically, they're either appointed by the village manager or by the Board of Trustees. Is it
We-
appropriate
we
for us to
did-
clarify that, or?
We did appoint them. I don't know, is it appropriate to clarify or it's not necessary?
Well, I'd like to clarify.
Yeah,
Clarify.
yeah, so
Yeah, who
it
picked
should be
them?
the board.
It's
Yeah,
the
what
board.
the process is that the board shall appoint 4 of the members.
And who are
Okay.
they?
At present, there are only 3 members.
So we have to pick another,
Two more.
After, yeah.
2 more.
No, we
After,
will have
after
to,
this is signed, it will be, a
Appointed by the
total
Board
of
of
5
Trustees, yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
so we picked 2
So there
more.
are now 3, right? So
Okay, and who are
they
the-
are John Fry
Mhm.
John Fry.
and you? Or you just
No, I'm
liaison?
just-
to-
Latanya
Oh,
Humes.
Latanya,
Latanya
yeah.
Okay,
and Joe.
And Joe is for GDC.
got it.
So
Thank
we
you.
get to appoint.
Now we know.
We'll change nominated in 2 spots then.
To appoint them.
Right.
Yeah, thank you very, very much.
And could you clarify that they're appointed by the Board of Trustees?
Sure.
Thanks.
Page 15 at the top, the ultimate decision of whether to formally dedicate the village land shall rest solely with the village board in its ultimate discretion. Ultimate twice in one sentence? I don't know. You use ultimate twice in the same.
Where?
Page 15 at the top.
At the top, I have,
Oh.
numbers that
It is,
why do you have something different than us?
it was printed out.
2.5.
It's
2.5.
2.5B.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, that's
it's
actually
on-
page
so it's
14.
on page 14,
Oh, well, there is that too.
maybe. Yeah, no, I can't find it.
Just look for section
Okay.
2.5 and then go to B.
B, I'm there.
Remove the redundancy in the
Yeah.
second ultimate discretion?
Right. Because you already have solely.
Right. Take out the first ultimate.
Yeah.
Second to the last line in subsection B will erase the word ultimate.
In subsection H, on the next page, I'd like you to change the fireman sculpture to firefighters. Put that clip in for my own stuff. Section 6.1A, there is a letter that's in bold print, pardon me for nitpicking, but it's the word "A."
Nope.
On the
It's in
5th
bold,
line,
yeah.
it's the only thing in bold here.
Well, let's state there are
or, or a foreign investment, yeah,
I see, okay.
yeah. It's a foreign investment, yeah.
And I think an issue that we may still have, I could be wrong, this looks like it's been changed, on 7.2. Yeah, that looks like it has been changed. The construction completion date throughout all of this document has been changed, but the rest of that, and shall have all rights and remedies, that is the new language, and that's in, right? Okay, that's it for me. Anyone else?
Boombox and
Chicken leg.
Chicken leg,
Yeah,
yeah.
it should be in here, the boombox
Yeah.
and the chicken leg, don't you think?
the lawn chair. Lawn chair.
I have a couple questions, and some of them are just to help me understand the legal language in some cases, Lori, so you may be able to help me with that. On page 8, which, for my friends looking online, is in the definitions.
Yep.
It's where Bill was asking. No, it's not. It's sooner than-
Subsection.
Subsection W and X, when the new language, and I can't see what the old language is here, but I don't think that's relative to my question, because when it says "can be conveyed" in both instances, it's talking about the parkland that's going to be conveyed to the village,
Yeah, I asked
correct?
them to clarify and make sure that the agreement acknowledged the fact that it cannot happen automatically, that there is a necessary step of getting subdivision approval.
It has to go before the planning board.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that, but it says "can be conveyed only upon subdivision approval from the village planning board." I guess my question would be, I understand it can't happen without the subdivision approval from the village planning board, like I get that that's a preliminary step. I'm just not sure why we would say "can" rather than "shall." Does it say someplace else that this will definitely happen, or just that it could upon the subdivision approval?
It says elsewhere in the agreement, this is just a definition.
Okay,
It says
it
elsewhere
does?
in the agreement that these are the lands that are going to be conveyed.
Okay,
Shall
maybe
be-
we'll come up with that.
It
then.
shall be conveyed,
We can say
and
conveyed. Shall, we can say shall.
Sure.
I just, in my quick search to find another instance of parcel B1, it could have been, I didn't find
Shall
another
be.
reference, but,
Shall be?
The same thing in X, yeah.
yes.
Shall be.
Elsewhere, it talks about the fact that this is in full satisfaction of the rec
Sure,
fees,
but-
additional rec fees. So, yes, elsewhere in the
But-
document, which I can find pretty quickly if you'd like me to.
But shall be would make me more comfortable in both W and X.
Just so everyone understands too, and Valerie and I had some conversations this week, what we'll probably do is, once we're through all of this work and work's begun, we'll probably move towards looking to file our applications for that subdivision application sometime this year.
Great.
So obviously, the limiting factor is that conveyance, or the approval and the conveyance to the village has to occur before the first partial C of O for the project.
Yeah.
So even though we may achieve the subdivision approval this year, the physical, I guess, conveyance, and that's more of a
Yeah.
legal conveyance.
It's
Yeah,
okay,
I-
we're not going to pick it up and take it away. so-
no, I guess my
It's not
question
like-
would be,
It's not like the subdivision happens and
Right.
it's there.
Yeah.
So-
right, and would it, and actually, I guess part of my question would be, would
We're
it
not
behoove the village to make that happen as quickly as possible, or to hold off on that conveyance for a little while, till it makes more sense?
We're gonna work on the subdivision approval very similar to what we did with Avalon. The conveyance can't take place until all the utilities or infrastructure
CO,
are in.
final CO.
Because once it becomes parkland, then if we have to put utilities or infrastructure, it's gonna be a very similar process to what you're dealing with in Snowden Avenue, where you have to
Right,
go back to
okay.
the state and.
If it should be formally dedicated as
Right.
parkland, it creates some. So we want to make sure the entire project is completed with final COs
Right,
issued.
exactly.
So then we wouldn't want to say "shall be conveyed upon subdivision approval by the planning board."
No, the two things have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
This is just saying that if it's going to be, in order for it to be conveyed, it needs to go through the subdivision approval
Right.
process.
Yeah, and it's in response to a suggestion I made this last round, where I said, please make it obvious that it doesn't spring forth automatically, that there needs to be a reference to it,
Even
having,
after- oh, sorry.
having the necessity of subdivision approval.
Right, even after the planning board gives subdivision approval, it still doesn't equate to, you still have to go through the process of recording it down at the county to get certain signatures. So even if the planning board does give subdivision approval, it's not automatically subdivided at that point. There still is an additional process that takes place.
Correct, and I would assume, since you'll be taking real estate, that there'll need to be a resolution authorizing signature on the deed and
Yeah.
the transfer document. So
Okay.
there are necessary steps, but I realized this last reading that it wasn't clear from the definitions that this step was going to be included in the process, so I had asked him. But if we can tweak the language any way you'd like it to be tweaked.
Yeah, this can become shall in both W and X.
And it also helps with the planning board process as well, because then we can relate it back to the LDA that the initial approvals were always contemplated the subdivision taking place. So it helps on both.
Okay, if it, like, from a legal, like, the way it reads, like, what I was thinking is, it may not make sense to say shall, if what we're really saying is, we just want to be sure that it's understood that no conveyance can happen unless and until there's a subdivision approval by the planning board.
Yeah, it's good.
It doesn't put us in I just don't want to put us in a position of saying, wow, this happened before, was really in our best interest because we had to follow the word shall. Okay,
It's all good.
Yeah, it'll be offered.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay. Thank you. Then, I guess my other question would be related to unavoidable delay.
Page?
On page 10, it's under again, under the definitions, XX. Definitions.
What subdivision?
Yeah,
XX?
when you're talking about an act of God, subdivision X, lowercase I.
Yep.
It's, I just wanted to make sure that I understand when you talk about an act of God, which I understand is a term that's used, as actually.
It is a
you know,
legal term.
It is
It's
a
an
legal term,
insurance
from
term.
an insurance term as much as anything, right? But the expression of reasonably anticipated weather conditions for the geographic area, that you understand the history of flooding anytime there's a major storm, that's a potential, and so I wouldn't want,
That would be a
that to
reasonably
be-
anticipated weather condition.
Yes.
it would.
Yeah.
And so any precautions that you can take to avoid
Right.
delays.
Public
Okay.
enemy. Who exactly is a public enemy?
Yes, the riot and civil disturbance was interesting, too.
It's Christina, right?
A lot of the language is just historic, it's just.
Yes, it is.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be clear that, as we've alluded to many times, there's a history of major flooding in that area. So I just didn't want that to become like, oh my gosh, but it was an act of God. It rained. We had a superstorm, whatever it's called this time, you know.
That's why-
It's clearly in our best interest to not delay anything, and to get this started as soon as possible, get the building completed as soon as possible, start to get people in, start to get a restaurant user in, and get everything up and going. I mean, it's clearly in our best interest as well, so.
Insurrection is fun, too, in case we're invaded by Haverstraw.
Come over and.
You never know.
And a civil disturbance,
Yeah.
very politely.
Since the 60s.
Politely somehow.
It's a civil.
Interrupt you.
I understand that that's where you are right now, but you
I'm
never
sorry,
know
this
what
is
could
just too much
happen. A year from now, circumstances could be different, and people might not feel the same impetus to be moving forward as quickly as possible. So I just didn't want to have any reason for an obstacle. And then my last question would be, just to help me better understand, Lori Lee, project versus construction. I know that was a change
Yes.
that's been made throughout, and there was good reason for that.
Yeah.
And I just want to better understand how does
Sure.
that provide us greater protection?
Sure, it does, because the project completion date is key to the final certificate of occupancy. The construction completion date is tied to substantial completion, not including the interiors, interior finishes and the residential. And the interiors, they have to be able to elongate the process for the restaurant. Should an operator arrive, and you've already put interiors in a restaurant, and they want it some other way, this makes it a much more attractive situation to an operator of a restaurant. So we differentiated the two because it is important to recognize substantial completion and to be moving forward with a couple of key things. But it's important for the village to be protected for the longest extent possible. We didn't want to be put into a position where the substantial completion had finished, but there was a change in an ownership that was no longer subject to your discretion should occur. So you've issued a permit, you've opened permits, and now you're going to be issuing a final CO to a different entity. So I wanted to be sure that those protections were afforded to the last possible moment, which would be the issuance of your final CO for the entire project.
Who's the new owner of the restaurant are you referring to?
If you'll see,
explain
it's
it?
keyed to your approvals, the discretionary approvals you have on the assignment or transferability of the project.
It's actually key to several different things.
Several, but that was
And
the most important.
What it basically does is it carries out obligations longer. It
Yes.
carries out obligation of the agreement longer because the project completion date happens later than the construction completion date. So it was a comment that was made to us, and we incorporated that change in the document that you have now.
And how does that impact the pilot timing?
Doesn't.
Doesn't it?
Not at all.
Unrelated.
Okay. At what point do people have the opportunity to move in? Do we do partial C of Os along the way here before the project completion?
They'll need a certificate of occupancy, whether it be partial or final, that meets the village code requirements. So therefore, in the two cases that I know of where partial certificates of occupancy have been issued, they've been studied and restudied, escrow has been taken, agreements have been reached. So we're careful to say when a partial CO is issued because it needs to meet the satisfaction of the building department, and it also has the extra level of safety and security because really it's still a construction site. It's much harder to phase in a single building. As we know, Atria down the street was issued one, but we took assurances and we created a safety zone around the areas that were still under construction, none of which were interior to the building. The building was ready for occupancy. So we will have to see as this project develops whether it will be capable of doing a floor by floor, or whether, the health and safety is essential to the issue of partial CO, and that's written right in your code.
And that
So
doesn't-
any discussion of issuance of a partial CO will certainly take a lot of review, a lot of time, and you will be aware of that as it comes in.
And the project completion isn't done until there are no more partials to be done.
Correct.
All of the COs for every single square inch of this project
Yes,
have to be given before the project is completed.
correct.
So a partial CO, so people could move into some parts of it, doesn't mean the project is completed. So it continues that extended coverage of this document to protect the village.
And it is possible the restaurant will remain in the same hands and be leased out to a restaurateur. And if worse comes to worse, Joe can cook.
He actually is a pretty good cook.
It's actually possible that the restaurant would be completed first,
Yeah.
and that would be the subject of a partial certificate of occupancy application, and we would entertain that if that were the
We
case.
can call it Eat at Joe's.
We can call it Eat at Joe's.
We're hoping for a little higher end.
Mark and Joe's?
I'm not a good cook, but I could be the maitre d'.
Okay.
Having not read every word of this document and just been focusing on the changes and the things that jumped out at me, could you clarify for me what are the things that you say it triggers a lot of things to happen during, like the project completion date?
Well, you'll see every time the word project has been inserted in red, and I did print this in
You did?
in red and color for you, so you could see. Anytime that's included. Article 5 has a lot of references to do that, and that is the representation that the developer intends to develop the project. And based upon that, you assured yourself in the former LATA, a copy of which I have sitting here, that you would retain the discretion to approve transfers or assignments, because it was in the village's best interest and the developer's stated interest that he wanted to develop the project, not hold the land and sell the land.
And everything that's not in red has not changed and has already been agreed on.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. This last round was just responsive. You received the draft prior to this with my comments, and then they responded to those comments, and he was kind enough to send me that this morning, so I immediately sent it out to those of you on the board, so you could see the changes that were in response to my remaining comments.
Right.
And the items that are highlighted on this, because we've been accepting changes as we've been moving through the process for the last year. We've been
Right.
accepting changes as to format, changes as to language, but this document is and I can't stress this enough, it supplements the rights and obligations. It only revises the rights and obligations in as much as it's specific to the supplement.
Got it.
The other documents, there are 3 of them, 1 main and two amendments, they remain of record.
Got it.
And from here we proceed, except as expressly revised in this supplement, they remain. And so now we proceed to look at the bigger picture of easements and cross easements, because the 5th modified plan is different than the 4th modified plan. So now councils will talk about what agreements remain in place and how we can amend, and you'll see that document, the easement agreement that's discussed in here. And this document recognizes the fact that that easement agreement will need to
We'll follow.
follow next, because that will be to reflect the requirements of the 5th modified plan. Not the least of which is the proposed transfer in the future of those two other parcels to the village, where they were going to be retained by the developer and they were going to be publicly accessible. Now they will actually be public lands.
Got it.
So anytime, if we, for example, in that easement agreement, were granted an easement from the developer, it's no longer needed to have an easement from the developer because we're going to own the property. So it will extinguish that easement. So we'll look to that as the process is
It's cleanup.
unfolding. Mhm.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, thank you. Keep at it.
Thank you for your time.
Finish those floors.
Back to work.
Yep.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Very good, thanks.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a continuing discussion of the review of the Market Square and Post Office parking lots. The public will recall that the board recently engaged a consultant who came into a work session to present two of the final, their two proposals, or at least what they found to be either zoning compliant, or if there was a desire to go beyond zoning compliant. So they produced two conceptual bulk proposals, if you will. They were no way intended to reflect architecture or any of those other elements. At this point, our village planner, Valerie Monastra, is here, and Ingrid Richards, our downtown development rep manager, is here as well. We'd like to discuss with the board the next steps. We would like to begin the process of, at least administratively and internally, creating some boilerplate, some prospective RFP, so we can begin the process of sharing it with our other boards, the zoning board, the planning board, the historic preservation, and also giving the public an opportunity to be heard on their concerns, comments, and observations. So as we sort of reviewed it, the next step really would be for us to sort of be given the green light to begin our process of gathering together and starting to pull out some of the old RFPs that we have and putting together potential development prospects for these parcels, as well as reflecting some of the observations that the public has made already. So on that happy note, I'll turn it over to Valerie.
All right, so I think that was a good summary of a lot of the bullet points that I was going to hit. But no, I think the presentation and I think the final report demonstrated to this board that there are options out there. And I think it also demonstrated to this board that you know, there are, as we move through this process, there's going to be choices that this board is going to make as to how we want the RFP, you know, what exactly do we want it to contain, what information, what kind of information do we want to convey to a particular developer. But we're not looking for those answers tonight. What we're looking for is basically a green light to be able to start putting together some sort of drafts to start to begin that conversation with this board and then ultimately the other boards, because we're going to want them to be engaged in this process and also buy in on this process as well. I know Ingrid also had some ideas about trying to put together some timelines for this board so that, we can, because I think we don't want anybody on this board to feel like we're going to rush this particular project, but we also don't want to take another 10 years for this project to have some sort of decision made to it. So I think we want to try to keep it going, but at a pace where everybody feels comfortable that they have time to digest the information and then also be able to make informed decisions on the matter.
Yeah, my belief is that after we have open discussion with the board, we'll create a timeline and send it around to the Board of Trustees, and they can give us feedback, and we will all agree on that timeline and move forward so that the board understands what staff is doing and how we plan to proceed. And we're all in agreement. So that is why we're here tonight, is just to get your thoughts so that we can start the staff process of moving forward.
There were a couple of things that came up in the process, decisions that we have to make in terms of what direction we want to go first. That is, we did talk briefly about having a design competition.
Yeah.
Do we want to go in that direction first? And is that the first of two sets of RFPs? I'm not sure that the design competition is an RFP. I'm not sure what language you use for that. But if we were to do that, it would slow down the actual development, but it might come up with a different product from what would ordinarily do it.
Mayor, could you allow staff to research that process so we can understand how it's done, and from there we can put something together for the board?
Yes.
And the board can say, yes, we want to move forward, no, we don't want to move forward, and have a general discussion about it.
Yeah.
If the board feels strongly about it, we can definitely research it and provide you with documentation on that concept.
And even after you do that, we may decide that we don't want to have a design
Exactly.
competition, that we want to go ahead the other way, or we
But
just
we'd like
want to
to
have
see
a
how it
design
works.
competition, so it's,
Right?
yeah. Yes, John?
So I guess, from my perspective, I think, in addition to maybe the contest element of it, I would like to see some formalized public engagement having to do with, some sort of a share it type of scheme where we can allow people who lived here for a year or 30 years or all their lives to, talk about what their vision is. This is something that was very beneficial to us as part of the comprehensive plan because we took a lot of input, and I think we learned a lot about what's important to people, and we learned a lot about what their vision is. So I'd like to, again, same type of analysis, tell us, what you think that could possibly look like, how we would put that together. But I think that's a really important process. This is a very, very important project for our village.
Well, I'm going to suggest, we can
I'm sure that's not lost on you, so.
No, we can put both, we can put together information for this board as to what both those types of components would entail.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to logically go through this process, typically you would have your charrette probably before you have a design competition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that would make sense, because that would give us parameters for the people who do the competition.
Right.
Yeah. And I loved what we did during the comprehensive plan. I loved participating in it. The range of opinions and the ideas that had a tremendous impact in the final document make the charrette really valuable. Except charrette always sounds to me like it's a hot dog stand. Why is that?
Well, we put on,
It's a tumbril.
before we went out
Also-
for the request for proposals last time, we actually did public meetings on the 3 different sites.
Mhm.
And that was actually very worthwhile. There was about 40 people there, and we put the we showed each site, we showed the characteristics of each site, and I feel that having that kind of public input helped the process for 147, 155 Main Street, because by that time, people were understanding, you know, your general concepts, what the zoning would allow, you know, and they felt more comfortable and more engaged, and, you know, and those comments actually worked their way into the request for proposal, if you recall, last time for the 147, 155
Yeah.
Main Street
Yeah.
RFP. So we could put together something, you know, because the charrettes can run the gamut, you know, and we'll come back with a concept, you know, because you're not gonna want necessarily an open-ended charrette as opposed to one that's more focused as to, because we've already gone through the possibilities there, so you're not gonna wanna open up and start with, well, what kind of possibilities would you want all over again? You just sort of focus in on what the different ranges that we know that are economically feasible, say.
Along the lines of what John was suggesting, I think it's this has been a valuable experience to understand what a developer would see as a viable option, what a developer would like to do with a space. And I agree, I think, with everybody that parking lots are not the highest and best use of our downtown and are not in the best interest of Austining long-term. And so with that understanding, I also feel that this has been a really valuable exercise, and it's one step in the process. And I feel, in fact, there's a member of the public here, and one of his suggestions at a past meeting was there's a lot of members in this community who have ideas that we'd like to contribute, and please allow us to be part of this process. And I'd like to see it not just as part of a work session agenda where we've got 5 other things to take care
No,
of.
charrette is
But-
separate. It's a
Yeah,
totally
Thank you.
different thing.
plan.
I think the schools have done a great job in recent years of doing it at different times of the week, doing things on a Saturday, doing things other evenings of the week to make sure that people, depending on whatever their schedules are, that they're able to participate in it. I was really surprised when I spoke to a few business owners that are adjacent to this property that they were not aware that this was happening. I think it's really important that we do significant, direct, door-to-door outreach to the business owners and to the people who live in these neighborhoods and all of our community, but specifically like businesses adjacent to this property that didn't know any of this was being discussed. Now, we can all say they're not reading their web blast, they're not, but if they're not, it's still incumbent upon us to be working with the chamber and to work with all of the downtown businesses, everybody on Main Street, everybody on Spring Street, and let them know what's going on, ask them to participate in it, as well as Historic Preservation Commission. And I feel like, you know, anybody who has stood up and volunteered to be on a council or a commission or a committee for the village, they've already signed up to be volunteers and to want to have a voice. All of those people are very easy for us to reach out to and make sure that they have a voice, and maybe the sort of guidance that you're talking about, so it's not just an open-ended free-for-all. Maybe we say, okay, on this Saturday in April, we're going to begin with a presentation from the Historic Preservation Society, and we're going to talk about, you know, from a historical perspective, let's look at this, what was here in the past, and, you know, something about the history of Austining. Or we're going to invite somebody from the business community to talk about things that have worked well as creative anchors for a historic downtown, because we're not going to get a big box store to be our anchor. So what kind of approach might we in the village be able to help facilitate bringing to the downtown and have that as the core of any sort of RFP that goes out? I'm really, I feel it's very premature for us to create a calendar and say we're going to have an RFP out after we do these 3 steps. I feel like we haven't begun to engage people outside of this
I
room
think
nearly
it's very
enough.
important that we do have a calendar which can vary. A calendar can be set up and it can expand.
Sure.
But that we do have a focus on how to proceed. So
Yes.
if we do the charrettes first, then that's early in the calendar, before an RFP. You can't let this go on for years. It has to be, as it was with the comprehensive plan, the charrettes have to be very defined. We reached out, we sent a mail, right? Didn't we send mail? And
inviting
at
people.
significant expense, I must say, and that's the one thing that we haven't budgeted for. But we did send mail out to everyone to invite them. We have Gary here as
And we
our
actually-
scribe.
We did do some personal outreach to some of the businesses.
Yeah, we did.
And the chamber was present at that. But I understand what you're saying, that, you know, sometimes if you don't have the direct conversations with everyone.
Perhaps.
I didn't
Yeah,
know
well,
anything about it.
certainly downtown, it is easy enough to paper every store.
Yeah, I
and
think your
every-
outreach can be part of your calendar,
Sure.
definitely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Perhaps we need
Build
to
it right
have-
in.
make a list of all the stakeholders. Who are all the stakeholders? And if you make the list and then cross them off as we contact and get representatives from all the stakeholders. This was done very well during the comprehensive plan. So it's not like we don't know how to do it. We just need to quantify it. Who are the stakeholders? How are we going to contact them, and make sure were they contacted and who's going to come? And then we can do the charrettes, and it's Sabrette is the hot dog stand. It's not charrette. That's what that's
I
about.
mean, we can speak to the adjacent business owners that you refer to. I can go down there personally myself and have them sign something and explain it to them, give them the package of what we've been discussing, and have them sign something.
It's not that I want them to sign something, it's that
Yeah.
I want them to, and it's not that they would necessarily object. It was just that I
No,
talked to three
yeah.
and two of them didn't know about it.
Yeah.
And my feeling was, wow, not only do I want you to know about it, I want you to be part of the conversation because you can tell us what you're experiencing. You have a long-time business here in the downtown, you know, what do you think would work? What do you think would be helpful to your business? And you know, I want them to be part of the conversation,
absolutely.
and I want them to understand that, you know, we value their opinion and that the village is here to help support them.
What we'll do is, I mean, clearly there seems to be, you know, you want an outreach component, so we'll work on what that outreach component will entail, because there's some, again, those are gonna be some decisions from this board as to what type of outreach, you know, and whether you're gonna put money towards outreach or not. The other issue is we'll identify the stakeholders, you know, we'll bring that back to the board, and you will have to, again, also determine, you know, do we, you know, because when you start having these larger venues, you know, and there's a lot of, you know, you can have charrettes with up to like 200, 300, 400 people if you want, but, you know, you get a different type of input than you do when you have a charrette of like 50 people, you know, and when you were just talking about the different types of seminars and stuff, you know, you know, because some of those are seminars as opposed to charrettes, you know, and so we'll bring you back the different options of, you know, public outreach, public meetings, and, you know, you can sort of decide how you want. Understand, though, that all these meetings and these things, they all take time. So that will definitely add to your timeline, for
Right.
sure.
I just want to be sure we're not just doing outreach to inform people of what we have decided, but actually doing outreach because this is a collaboration with our community, because their voice is essential to the
I
success.
think what Ingrid meant by having someone sign that we know that they've gotten the
Yeah,
material
because-
and are invited. That's,
Right,
that's,
because it's specifically, how do we let people know, how do we know
No.
that they were told?
yeah.
That's a method of the board
Right.
understanding these people were actually told.
Okay,
Yeah.
but my
What
concern
was
is that once
happening.
they bother to show up, that they're showing up not just to be told what we've decided, but they're showing up because we
Well, like,
recognize
we
that their
haven't decided
input is
anything.
essential.
Right, this board hasn't decided anything at this point.
Right.
So clearly, whatever we end up putting together, there will be a full agenda. That's why there's gonna be even decisions on the charrette, you know, what kind of information do you wanna receive from the public? And you'll have to make that decision. And then that's how we'll put together that public meeting. So it's, you know, I mean, that's what I'm saying, it can really run the gamut, you know, and so there's a lot of decisions that this board will then have to make. And clearly, I think the first step is to come back with the stakeholders, the outreach, and the type of public.
Perhaps a valuable thing to do if we're going to meet people individually is not just to get them to sign something, but to get their email so that reaching out to them in the future is not expensive.
No, absolutely, and what, you know, I have done is I've gotten emails and I do send out information to the businesses. Now, maybe I don't have everyone's email, but there is an effort made. To go down there, get information, emails. Not all the business owners have emails. Some of them do not use computers. So therefore, there's an issue there. So you really have to go, and you have to go into the actual business and speak with them. Not
Right.
all of our
Right.
business owners
I have,
emails.
actually, I'm sorry, I have a couple questions, and I hope maybe some suggestions as well at the same time. I want to back up a little bit. We finished the whole process. We have not decided, this board has not decided anything in what's going to happen downtown. And I don't think we are going to be doing anything without the public's input, because we do serve the public. It's very simple. Now, in the contract that was signed with our consultants, there was a line in there where they were supposed to give us all the documents,
That's correct.
including the CAD
I've already
files.
asked for the CAD files.
Okay, great.
And I'm waiting for them to
So
send
soon as we get that information, Valerie, please, I'm not sure if anyone else wants a CD, but I want a CD with the CAD files. Couple ideas were brought up before in different conversations that I had with different people. And going back to the architectural background, I do have three friends, and I spoke to someone here as well, where we can get students doing thesis project, like I did in Sleepy Hollow for the old GM factory in there. That was my thesis project. So we can have a couple of my ex-classmates, a couple of my ex-professors, maybe have something, or some of the schools can do something, and just give them an idea. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted the CAD files and all that information in there. So that could happen almost at the same time. I can take care of that part. You guys don't need to do that. The other piece of this was that you guys are going to look into, if we do a competition, what type of competition we have or whatever. Hold on, I'm sorry. When you do that homework or the research, is there any way that you can find out if other communities have done the same, if they have done something similar to what we're trying to do, and what part of their village, of their community they were trying to develop, and what happened to it? If
I've
that
done a
could be-
little bit of research on
Yeah.
that already, and
Okay.
The main competitions are for large structures, large buildings, or large developments, even if they're not large buildings, large developments. And there are two forms of competition. One of them is a closed one where you invite people to enter. The other one is an open one. And there are two different kinds of juries, one for each of those.
Yeah.
But it is not usual for a community to be missing half of its downtown. So it is,
No,
it's a
of
very
course.
unusual situation.
No, and I
So for a
understand that,
concert
no.
hall, there might be a competition for
Yeah.
a museum. Now, there is no reason why we couldn't do that, even if no other community had.
No, but if another community did a building,
It'll
a
make it
building,
easier for us.
if we can get a sample of that and what happened to it,
There are 46 communities that are members of the Westchester Municipal Officials Association. Our esteemed mayor is the president of that body. Could you not stand up in front of the room when you're doing your usual "Hi, how are you?" and ask, "Hey, has anybody in any of these communities ever done something that looks like this?"
We know that New Rochelle did, but it was for a very large project.
Right, but-
So-
but you could-
others might. have
But
done
it
could
it
do
is
that
just
as soon
an
as-
idea.
You can
Yeah.
do that as soon as Thursday, the 13th
Right.
of March.
Anyway, the other point, and I know that we heard a lot of people, how come we weren't told that this was going on? One of the ideas that we were putting together before of the 2014 goals that we had, I brought up the idea where this was more for a big developer that comes next to Austin, to the village of Austin, to put a big sign in front of their property and advertise their meetings. Now that we're doing this for this lot, maybe the homeowner or the business owner is not there that day where Ingrid goes to see them. Maybe they didn't get the email, maybe the computer went down. But if they see a big sign where it says, Charette, meeting, 7 o'clock, Saturday, at the community center, right in their face, that to me, it will be a cheaper way to communicate what we actually want to do. And that could be something that we can have the big sign and just replace the date and the time and the location if we have to. But just have the sign there as a permanent marker until something happens there.
That's
if
a
it ever
very good
happens.
Yeah,
idea.
it's a good idea.
I remember seeing the comp plan advertised on the signs that Henry
Yes, Henry would always
has,
put up the signs.
you know, the welcoming signs that have the
Yeah.
announcements
I mean,
on them.
we-
I
we can
remember
put
seeing you
we do a
advertise them.
banner. We do banners
Right,
for the
banners.
summer, you know, for Village Fair or anything like that. It could be a big banner. It could be a sign down there. I mean, we are thinking of development 2 sites, so to speak. Well, 3. 2 of them almost the same.
I think,
But
Valerie,
we could
when
be
you're,
something like that. It could be done.
Nice
when you're
full-page
preparing
ad in
all
the
of
Gazette.
this, when you're preparing all of this, and you're coming up with ideas from what you're hearing,
Right.
could you prepare a budget, potential budget for us on that too? Because we need to know what we're talking about in terms of the signs and the banners and everything else we want to do.
But it doesn't have to be a banner. It could be
No,
just a
whatever
big
it
sign.
is,
It could
whatever
be
it
a
is.
24 by.
Are we
48
anticipating
or
this
whatever.
to just be in English or English and Spanish?
English and Spanish?
Okay.
Portuguese,
That adds-
Italian.
Adds to the budget.
I think bilingual is probably.
Give us an idea for both.
Okay.
Cantonese.
Some of the signage we could probably do in-house, I don't think that's a big deal. I think it's
Yeah.
a good idea. We can put a
Yeah.
sign up and just leave it there, just change it.
I mean, we do have, what do we have, the kiosks right in there?
Yeah,
That could be something that we can utilize, you know, for things like that. I
We do
mean,
have the 2 flagpoles.
Yeah.
we can use.
I mean, it could be something really, I don't want to say an amount, but it could be something really
More
inexpensive.
substantial sign.
Yeah, and it will solve a lot of the issues that we've been having.
No, I just
of
know
communication.
whenever with the comprehensive plan, I always hired a translator to translate everything.
Good.
So that there was not, because we were having issues with when you ask 3 different people who speak Spanish who work for the village to translate something, you get 3 different types of translations.
That happens with
So-
English.
So that's why I was asking that, because we actually paid each time for everything that we had sent out.
Right.
We had somebody.
You know, we might be able to ask, I know the schools often, they have like the headsets, and I've
Yeah,
seen,
used
you know,
to
they
give
have
us
a
the
liaison
headsets,
that,
that's correct.
yeah, and she'll just sit in the back of the room and be whispering throughout the meeting for people, and
We
Right.
that was actually a
found-
volunteer, that, I mean, somebody who works for the district, so.
We
I
only
don't know.
did that once, and we actually found it was not very productive.
Hmm.
That having somebody talking in the back of the room and having people saying, "What did she say?" Didn't work very well.
So then is it better to do a Spanish language charrette, an English language charrette? What would we be talking about? What would make sense?
We
my-
had, well, the people we had hired to oversee the charrettes could speak both English and.
Yeah.
and,
So they could
Spanish.
explain everything in Spanish. That
We-
they-
Maybe we don't have to do that anymore. Maybe I could translate.
Right,
Yeah.
so,
You're pretty good at Spanish?
Creo que sí, un poquito.
Muy bien.
It's a
I can
good
help you with
thing.
the English part.
Yes, that'd be great.
No, no,
Please.
no, 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 no.
Probably not me.
Okay, anything else?
We have some homework.
We're on our way. Thank you.
good,
Thank you.
In your spare time.
That's good. Thank you both for coming in, and thank the board for the direction. I think a lot of important information, so continue working on it. This evening, I am standing in for our treasurer, Tom Warren, so the next item on the agenda is small claims assessment review update. Tom had attached a short memo, but attached to that, you'll find the actual small claims settlements for each case. And this year, the actual reductions are $22,095.93. You'd actually budgeted $45,000, so it's reflective of the actual improving economy, so, and a lot of them have been settled, so.
Well done.
That'll be on for the next resolution.
Good.
Sorry, Richard, do you happen to know how much of our snow budget has been used?
I mean, I can get that information, I don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but the thing with the snow budget is, I can get you the latest figures, I can email it to you tomorrow. However, it's always lagging to the next payroll.
Yeah, I
So
know.
actually, what might probably be best, Christina, I think this week is payroll, right? So maybe we would have an idea by Friday, that might be best, because otherwise your
no problem.
information's 2 weeks old.
That would be
But I can
great.
get that, sure.
Thank you.
And we know what's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a tough winter, really, as everybody's aware. And,
Really?
I think all of them, yeah, it
The
has.
streets have been pretty clean. I mean, I don't know.
They've done a good job, actually, but all the municipalities are under the same situation,
It's
so.
very rough.
How are we fixed for salt?
Well, the last I heard, we had about 60 tons. I don't know if anything has been delivered since then. But again, I can give you that information probably by Friday. We'll have a good update for the whole week. So let me make note of that. So the next item is basically to set up for establishment of capital projects and also to close out 2 capital projects. And this deals with, I believe Tom forwarded a memo as well, and that is, I'll just briefly, for the public information, it's quite interesting and quite successful project. In 2012, following a facilities audit report, the village undertook 2 energy-saving projects that promised good payback for the village, and those were replacing the boiler and the radiator steam traps at the Rodriguez Operations Center, and to install high-efficiency and variable frequency drives on low-lift pumping stations at our Indian Brook water treatment plant. The concept for these 2 projects were that they would be paid back over 10 years with the energy savings. The boiler project at the DPW Center had an estimated cost of $297,820 to be paid back at an annual cost of $36,000, with annual estimated savings of $18,987, which would be approximately 16-year payback. The variable frequency drives had an estimated cost of $709,500 to be paid back at an annual cost of $86,000, with an annual estimated savings cost of energy of $104,000, resulting in almost slightly shy of a 7-year payback. The projects themselves came in actually under cost or projection, and also the interest rates that were originally conceptualized have actually dropped. The boiler project was actually completed for a final cost of $280,000, $17,700 less than estimated. The pump replacement and variable frequency drive was the final cost of $644,788, or $64,700 less than estimated, 9% less than the actual original estimate. In addition, the original factoring for the payback was based on 4% interest rate, and the current rate is 0.86%, so we'll see a substantial savings on that as well. So Andy Tees has certified both projects as being completed. At this time, NIPA would ask for the 2 projects to be accepted and to authorize the start of the amortization costs to be billed as part of the NIPA bills. So there'd be a resolution on for your approval at next week's meeting, and those were 2 good energy projects that were completed. So
That's terrific.
okay. Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is discussion on potential occupancy / perceived overcrowding legislation. And I sent a memo last week, and when we went back to look at it, what I thought was that I would try to present you with a number of potential options, and if you found them to be 1 or 2, I would say, to be things that you wanted to pursue, then I could turn them over to Lori Lee, and we could do more in-depth legal review to make sure that they were, legal and in keeping. Several communities have tried different avenues in order to stay on top of occupancy of their buildings. Some have been found to be legal, some not so much. So we try to be careful of that. We try to stay within the law. It saves us a lot of lawsuits and a lot of money. So I just wanted to reflect on what I shared last week. In 2009, I was the Corporation Counsel, and I drafted a local law entitled Multiple Dwelling Emergency Registration, which provided for registration and posting of information of non-resident owners of multifamily residences to facilitate contact. So that would also, you'd have in the hallway posted who the owner is, so if a tenant was having a problem getting some, if you had some problem in the building, you'd be able to get a hold of them, have a phone number, an emergency contact, and someone who would be available to address any issues during the night, on weekends, or whatever. This law was similar to one that was enacted in Peekskill. It was never enacted by the village, and instead an alternate law entitled Rapid Entry Systems, which we know to be the lockbox, was a commercial multifamily residence was passed to ensure access by the fire department. So that particular multiple dwelling emergency registration is one that you could look at again, but again, it would provide for better notification of landlords by tenants and protection of properties. The same type of legislation is already in place in several municipalities, one of which would be called like landlord property registration. So there are several that are already on the books of several municipalities around here. Mount Kisco has such a law. It requires the registration of all landlords of two-family or more in mixed-use property. This is requiring a paper filing only. It does not provide for any potential inspections. Brewster has a law that requires all rental units to be registered and that a permit for all but family members be obtained before any rental take place. Inspection is provided for upon permission of the owner or occupant. So it reflects the due process issue, which is that you can't, without probable cause, enter upon a premises without the permission of the owner. Hempstead and Freeport laws, and Hempstead law and Freeport Long Island laws were both found to be unconstitutional as they required an inspection prior to the issuance of a permit. So neither one of them passed muster in terms of probable cause for entry. However, if you want to look at a better registration of landlord and uses of property, you could consider one either as they have in Mount Kisco, which require all landlords within the village of two-family or more to come in. You have to pay a small registration fee, and they would have to file, you have to basically register what you have there, and it gives a little bit of more handle. And Brewster goes one step further. Again, just as we have now, if the landlord or the tenant permitted, you could actually get in to make an inspection with the owner's permission. So that's one category that I would recommend that you seriously think about. The other one is this so-called rebuttable presumptions. These laws are in place in Sleepy Hollow and also Port Washington, Long Island, and they provide certain presumptions that are rebuttable by the homeowner, i.e., for example, if you see two mailboxes or gas meters, you're entitled to, I would have the right, in theory, to go in and go to court and say, I saw two mailboxes at Bob DeRio's house, so I'm saying it's not a one family, it's more than a one family. And then he can come back and say, no, it's not. I can rebut that presumption by saying it's my mailbox and the other one is, whatever, from years ago. So it takes the burden from the prosecutor to the homeowner defendant to disprove the allegation. That's in place in Sleepy Hollow and Port Washington North, and it covers such things as mailboxes, number of gas meters. Looking at some of these laws, some of the presumptions need to be refined, for example, because it doesn't necessarily follow, as we know, that 4 dish antennas equal 4 family units. So, and also it has some things in some of these laws where if you've got 3 doors, then you've got 3 families. That doesn't necessarily follow. So, but it might be of use if the court found it acceptable, if the court was willing to allow the burden to be shifted from the homeowner, from the prosecution.
That sounds like the way to go.
So that's another option that I recommend that you think about. There are other things that are a little more difficult, I think would be a little more difficult for people to perhaps accept, which is one of them is in Peekskill, if we know. They require the reissuance of a certificate of occupancy every time you have a sale. So there's a little, I don't know totally how that went over. It's a little dicey. It's like I buy a house 5 years ago, I have a CO, I do nothing to my house, I can't sell it without getting a new CO. So you might catch some people doing something because the transaction can't go through without the CO. But on the other hand, I didn't do anything, so why do I have to have another inspection, and the second thing is if you have no bank involved, number one, or if it's only between family members, this will not help you. Because if it's buying from a family member to a family member, or if there's no bank involved, they may accept it without the CO. So that's one thing. And Danbury in Connecticut, which is outside of our jurisdiction, requires a new CO in 3 family or more premises after each rental vacancy, which is a little tough, where a certificate has been issued for a new building within the last 10 years. There is also, on a different topic totally, there are vacant building registrations. And as Trustee Casado offered, probably you could do it, think about it for vacant buildings and storefronts as well. And that provides that if you have a vacant building, you've got to register it, pay a fee. It's sort of to help people keep on top of who's on a building and who's responsible. The problem with that is that fortunately, we don't have that many. But secondly, some of these have been taken over by banks. And it's very hard, unfortunately, to get them to own up to their responsibilities. So that's a couple of the options. I'm open to any suggestions. We can continue the research. I would suggest from what we found, that if you want to try to keep a handle on who your landlords are and a little bit of the information in terms of how they're using the properties, you could think about the landlord registration. But at least I would suggest maybe, since it's in place in Sleepy Hollow, you might think about that rebuttable presumption. Again, dependent on the court's response, so.
I had a question yesterday that I sent to Lori Lee. There was a Supreme Court decision yesterday about access to a home without a warrant. If there are two people in the home and one of them says no but leaves the house and the other one says yes, then it is okay to do that. It's I think a really bad decision, but it may work in our favor. I don't know whether it will trump all of the rest of the regulations and laws that exist, but if it does, then that could help us gain entry. So I wanted to know.
We have to check that. I'm not familiar. The thing is, under your premise, though, if you go to someone's apartment, like, let's say you go to your apartment and your partner or significant other says, no, I don't want you in here. He's not home, you're home. I think we sort of have some of that ability already, but we would check that out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, one of the concerns that I have in regards to the law that Sleepy Hollow has, even though I think it's a good idea, but going back to history of how in this example, dishes or mailboxes or meters, I seen a two-family house having 3 meters.
Right.
Where each meter is for each apartment and the third meter is the main meter.
Yes.
So at that point, if we're gonna have, and I don't wanna say waste our time, but it's gonna be a waste of time at the end of the day when we have our code enforcement going to this whole process to go back to court to prove, the homeowner has to prove, he can come in and take pictures, but now we wasted almost, I want to say, I don't know how long does it take to do this whole process, but it could take almost 8 hours just to do one house. The same thing with antennas. The antennas, and I have experienced that myself, where you order an antenna from this company, you call them after a year, you want to switch, or the tenant wants to switch. They come in, they don't use the same antenna, not like the Cablevision or Verizon that they use the same cable. They leave that antenna there and they put another antenna right next to it. So now you have 3 antennas. Now the homeowner is his responsibility or her responsibility to take that antenna out or remove it and patch it. So it's a lot of stuff. So sometimes they just leave it there, hoping that they may be able to reuse. So that I'm a little, I don't know how I'm gonna go with that. The one in Peekskill, that actually has worked.
Which one?
The CO board, yes. And it's not only Peekskill, but I think a lot of the communities, they do the same thing. Maybe they don't have that in their laws, but they do have that they, as soon as you do a sale, they have to have the proof, or they have to have a letter from the building department saying that everything that has been done on your house, it has a legal
It's either
seal.
got to be in the law
So,
or the bank's requiring it.
well, that's probably,
Right.
what I have seen is probably part of the bank, because
Yeah.
when I have checked, they don't have anything on their bylaws, but I know Peekskill actually has
Yeah, they
worked.
do.
Because a lot of that stuff, I remember maybe 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, when mother and daughter settings on a single family house was still part of the zoning books in some municipalities. Peekskill took it off, and they said, we're not doing that anymore. And everybody had to get new COs at that point. So it helped out a lot in Peekskill.
We actually decided with the comprehensive plan and zoning not to allow that. It was proposed, but we never went there.
Yeah. The other one, I like the one in Monkisco as well. I talked to a couple of people in there when you actually have to register your house, even if it's a two-family, because I know a lot of the municipalities only have multiple, which means 3 and up. Monkisco has 2 and up, so to speak. So I think that's a good idea. So that could be something that we can mix them up. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just, I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I just, no.
No, I was just gonna say that, you know, I think, we don't have to select just one, because some of these have different elements to them. You know, I would think a C of O to a buyer of a property would be, well, it would provide them a certain comfort level. You know, some security that the building that they're buying is a, you know, it passes muster with our building department, and we might be able to head off any potential public or safety hazards that might exist there. I think the registration thing is a good idea too, because it'll allow us to, if we can drive that data into a database, and you know, hopefully, you know, once we can get more of our records, you know, into an electronic form, you know, I think we'll be able to do more of a comparative analysis to understand, you know, how these properties are zoned, and you know, what's the status of them when they're registered. And you know, it's a long-term strategy, but you know, I think this is something that's really important. I know that a lot of constituents and people that I talk to me about it, and they want to understand, you know, what we're going to do about illegal housing, and the situation in which, you know, not only are we putting the individuals that are living there, you know, in harm's way, but we're also putting our fire department and our other emergency workers in harm's way as well. And I'd like to see a combination of those two. I think the two of them together, you know, provide a couple of different safeguards and ways for us to monitor the use of property in relationship to rentals.
Yeah.
When a house is put on the market, the real estate industry has certain responsibilities to make sure that when they advertise a house, that everything in that house is legal and is according to what it says on the property card. So, I know, it doesn't always happen, but
Well, we all know about
ethical issues.
the market does not self-regulate. I think we certainly learned that in the financial services industry, and as much as there's certain, listen, some of my best friends are real estate brokers, but I'm just saying that, you know.
I used to have a card.
Well, even you, Bill. So, but what I'm saying is that this is a safeguard. These are things that we can put in place that can provide some assurance.
I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm just saying that they might be an ally for us in getting this thing attended to. That is, if they are required to make sure that the seller has a CO, that's part of their job. That can be part of their job.
Well,
so.
not only that, you know, before, you know, there's been times, and this has happened maybe when it was booming, like early 2000, when a lot of people were just buying houses. They were buying houses, and what happened was that you bought a house, either the attic was a finished attic, or there was a finished basement, or when they wanted to do something and they went to the building department, the building inspector comes in and says, we don't have a CO on your house, and they don't show that the attic was finished, or the basement was finished, or the deck was in the back of your house, like you're showing now here. So, but they bought it like that. So now is the new owners, the new homeowners' responsibility to legalize that. So if we stop that before,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's going to help the new homeowner to don't have to go through these whole hassles and have to pay it to legalize something that they had nothing to do with.
There are certainly
So,
circumstances
I think
in which
that will help.
in which our inspectors have gone to locations and said, you know, they come to look at a project, and they're like, well, you don't have one of these. Where did this come from?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think, you know, I think this just is a smart way to protect the public.
I actually, the first house that I bought had an unresolved issue on the title that we ended up having to deal with, despite the fact that, anyway. So I do appreciate it as a, being helpful to our future home purchasers. This is such a complicated issue because it, you know, as John was alluding to, it is our first responders, but it's also the people who are being exploited in homes sometimes that are overcrowded. And it's a burden on our resources, as we all know, you know, not just schools, but it's harder to clean streets if there's more people than we anticipate living on a block than used to. There's just a lot more cars, there's a lot more garbage. It's something that we have to deal with. I also, and I think I emailed this to you, and I don't know that there is an easy response. Are there services that exist in our community or in neighboring communities that we can be aware of if we're going to be able to find better ways of enforcing overcrowding laws? There will inevitably be families who may be displaced. I don't know what exists right now or what more we might be prepared to have at the ready.
They have a law, I know you did ask me about that, and you know, when I looked at this like 5 years ago, whatever, they had laws like that in New Jersey, which isn't necessarily, we can't necessarily, but it does exist there, that if the, if someone's put out because the homeowner, the owner of the property was doing something wrong, they were coming up with some, you know, compensation. So we can look at it, but I haven't seen it in New York, it is in New Jersey. So in other words, if you have a,
Yeah.
if you have a legal two-family.
I'm just thinking that law was proposed in New York State a few years ago, and I assume it wasn't passed, because I don't remember seeing it
Wasn't
passed,
this a
but it
state
was-
law? No.
No, it's not a state law, it's I mean, the ones in Jersey were done locally, like you would do, but they have a different constitution there. We can certainly look into it.
That would be brilliant, because
But it
what
does-
a great penalty it could be. You know, you have a single-family home, you got 3 families in there, and you have to put up those 2 other families in a fancy hotel for $200 a night until you find them a new place to live at your own expense. That would be a deterrent. That would make me very happy.
And I guess, I think all of these, it sounds like the Peekskill one might be interesting to look into, as well as one of the registration requirements. And I'd be very interested in finding out, you know, I understand your concerns with the, and it doesn't sound like satellite dishes were actually included as one of the rebuttable defenses, but,
Like meters, like gas
Meters
meters, you
is
have,
absolutely right.
you
You could
have
have a
electric.
two-family.
right, so there
Yeah,
could be
so
one extra meter for the
sometimes
shared
you even have
spaces and.
2 water meters, in some cases, you know, depending in, you know, how you're gonna break the utilities to the
Right.
tenants.
Yeah, you know what,
have that, so.
It was, a question was brought up by the Landlord-Tenant Relations Council about Con Ed just adding meters without going through the building department. And they can. They're not required to go through the building department unless the building owner is doing some electrical work, in which they should have applied for an electrical permit, in which case the building department might say, oh, why are you adding a bunch of electricity to your basement? And come take a look. But, that, I mean, we may have no ability to enforce that. I just found it kind of surprising that Con Ed can come in and add meters to properties, and they could make a one-family house into a 3-metered house. That complicates things
Which
for us, if
part
that's
of
possible.
activities from Con Ed surprised you most?
That happened to me.
Oh, really?
I have a 2-family house, but when we built the house, we put 1 meter. Con Ed said, you're a 2-family house. We have to separate it. So I have 2 electrical meters, but I only have 1 water bill. And it's a way for Con Ed to make extra money because, you see, there's all these standard charges per meter. So my tenant pays a rent that includes utilities. So I'm paying the utilities for the whole house. And my utility bill, without a change in uses, went up $120 a month when they switched to 2 meters. So that's just yet another Con Ed going in your pocket deal.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I guess also, the one other thing that I'd be interested in finding out as we're looking into this is, you know, we mentioned working with and finding out how the real estate industry would feel about some of these proposals, maybe getting some input from some, you know, legitimate, above-board, thoughtful property owners that we have in the village, because we know some of them, and it would be, I'd like to find out if, if we're going to enact any or all of these precautions, and we have good reason to be considering them, but what would be the burden on the legitimate, hardworking property owners in our community that are not trying to take advantage of the system?
Okay. So, if I can, I would extrapolate from this, so you want us to, I'd like to isolate it so we can try to get some projects done and bring them back to you. So we'll look at the peak scale law for the CO. We'll look at the registration similar to Mount Kisco or Brewster that provides for a voluntary inspection. And then we'll also, I'll look a little bit at the, we'll talk to the realtors. I know about Con Ed. Yeah, the one for Sleepy Hollow, right? For the
Yeah.
for
Yes,
Boswell.
yeah.
I'll
And
just
how,
look
what their
into it.
experience is
Yeah,
in those
exactly.
municipalities.
Yeah, we actually reached out. We didn't get the courtesy of a response yet.
So those three things.
I'll reach
Okay.
out to them as well, so.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is it's an update on capital projects, and Tom provided me with a short memo and not exactly a copy. His report basically indicates that there are really not that many changes in the capital project this particular month because of the winter weather. We know that the Kilbrook project is going ahead fine, that we're actually ahead of schedule, and the downtown development project had the final expenditures last month as we wound up that. Other than that, everything is basically status quo. The next board work session in March will include a resolution to transfer $29,298.40 from the water fund to the water garage roof project. If you recall, probably before some of us were here, there was an ongoing problem with the roof out at the Rodriguez Center, and Paul had been speaking about repairing it for quite a while, and so it came in a little bit over budget, so they would require a transfer in order to cover that. So that's really the only changes in the capital projects for this month. And the last item on the agenda, I will not be too lengthy because I think I've shared some of this with you, but just briefly, just to report into you and some of the things that have been going on the last month since I reported last. As we all spoke about this evening, the weather really has been the word of the last month. We basically had snowfall every other day. Now we've been gotten a break for a couple of days, so we're starting to catch up. The village, in fact, kept good pace with all the other communities, prioritizing cleanup. The first priority being the street clearance to allow passage. The imposition or the imposition of the emergency snow streets really was quite effective. In many cases, people really respected it, and they kept their cars off the streets, so they were able to remove some of the snow. And so we're pretty much caught up. I'll get some updated numbers for you in terms of the actual cost to date, and also salt on Friday, if that's available. And of course, the other weather-related events that we've been aware of are the water leaks because of all the freezing and the defrosting. The significant water leak that I reported to you on Chappaqua Road in the town was resolved through the assistance of an outside consultant who had to help locate it. And Andy called me late last night to report that, in fact, substantially all the leaks have been found and we're back to normal consumption.
Great.
So
That's good news.
so that's good news. In the last month, we had meetings with the town assessor to discuss ongoing certiorari cases and comparing them to what we had budgeted, and we're well in line with our budgeting for 2014. We attended a presentation by the town of Austining, including the town supervisor and the assessor, on the subject of the upcoming townwide tax assessment, the process, the communications, the ability of the village to interface with the town and hopefully use some of the information to assist the community, and also to make sure that the communication is had so people are well aware of what's going on. And
This is for the reval.
right, yes. The townwide assessment, right. Recently, we had an OEM meeting, and it was focused to a good sense on the storm-related events. We reviewed additional areas of potential cooperation between the involved departments. We continue to confer with the Corporation Council on addressing miscellaneous town court matters, and I think we've recently resolved a few, so I hope. So I think that's a good sign. We met with Corporation Council and the Personnel Director on various personnel matters. On January 30th, I attended the annual meeting of the New York State Bar Association with Corporation Counsel. We participated in conferences on municipal matters, several different topics, and also updates on recent decisions concerning SEQA regulations and their interpretation. Continuing, of course, as you've seen this evening, discussion and finalization of documents with Corporation Counsel and Harbor Square representatives on their project in the LADA. Recently, today, Christina and I attended the Westchester Municipal Managers Association meeting. We heard a presentation by Norma Drummond with respect to the HUD litigation and the county's urban county status, and we'll be able to talk about that more in the future. But we've had a good run with CDBG. We may have a little bit of intermediation here, but we'll talk more about it. Met with the treasurer, the mayor, and Trustee Garrity to begin the discussion on tax cap analysis and particular issues that we want to be concerned about as we review budgeting going into the future. The other day, we all attended the intermunicipal breakfast meeting with the Village of Ossining representatives, the Town of Ossining, and the Ossining Union Free School District. Recently, we had another CSEA negotiation. We'll be having additional sessions with the CSEA and PBA this Friday, and I'll be able to speak to you about a little more in executive session later. The other day, we spent the entire day, February 24th, interviewing consulting candidates for the water enhancement studies, which would be to enhance the existing water sources. And there are a number of options that the village is going to be able to consider. And it was really quite interesting. I learned a lot about the supply of water. So we'll be bringing back the suggested or recommended candidate to you shortly. Paul, Valerie, and myself met, and Andy. It was quite an interesting opportunity to meet with some very highly trained professionals with a lot of experience. So we'll be bringing them back to you for you to make the selection of who you would like to go forward with. Today we had a meeting with Con Edison on emergency preparedness and response between Con Ed and municipalities to weather events. And they've actually upgraded their communication abilities, both with municipalities and the general public. So, they're going to send us some more material, and I'll share it with you so we're able to keep our residents informed. And then the routine meetings with board members, preparation for staff meetings, and the weekly board meetings. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
No.
Any answers? Okay. This ends the televised portion of this evening's agenda. We have a session for legal advice, which is not open to the public and therefore not televised. Have a good week. Be careful. The weather is going to get nasty again on Sunday night, we're told. It is cold out there, so be very careful to stay hydrated and to stay warm, and look in on your neighbors and make sure they're okay. Have a good week. Good night.